Alright, so I want to do an analysis on chapter 2, which is the second language learning. Obviously, it starts out with the learner characteristics or how a child learns language. So, children, it tells us here that by definition, all second language learners, regardless of age, have already acquired at least one language. So, whatever your age is or whatever your orientation is, by the age of 5 or whatever, you have already a first language. Though, however, it is the cognitive maturity and mental linguistic awareness that allows older learners to solve problems and engage in discussions about language. So most of the time that children are learning a language is because they have memorized the language. So in another way, it tells us that another way in which a younger and an older learner may differ is the amount of time they can actually spend learning a second language. So we already discussed that the way a child learns the first language is through just memorization, and most of the time it's also the way a child learns a second language is through memorization as well. So it's cool because it's not really teaching the child the language. It's mostly the child picking up the language and saying, okay, so I'm in this environment right now, and I have to acquire the language that these peers around me are speaking. And so a child doesn't learn the language through, okay, so here's the grammar. No, he learns the language through almost a survival instinct of saying, I have to memorize this language, and so here I'm gonna remember certain words and what they mean according to what my first language was. So grammatical morphemes such as the ing of the present progressive and ed of the simple past are not acquired at the same time, but in a sequence. So after the text tells us how a child learns a second language, it tells us the errors of what a child makes. I wrote down, or I highlighted a really interesting one. Let me look. Okay, so this is cool. So before they learn to apply the regular simple past ed marker, that means that a learner who says I buyed a bus ticket, without further information, we cannot conclude that the one who says but will use a regular past ed marker, but it is appropriate. For a learner who says buyed has to provide evidence of developing knowledge of a systematic aspect of English. So a child knows that ed is a past tense, so he says I buyed a bus ticket. Not knowing that, okay, that there are certain rules to this, and this is where we can see where memorization takes place. Instead of saying I bought, the child says I buyed, not because he's wrong or because the kid has some sort of issue with his brain. No, it's because he knows English. It's actually the complete opposite of him being of something wrong. There's actually something completely right with him, where he puts rules into everyday situations that he does not know the grammatical he doesn't know the grammar of it yet. Alright, so developmental sequences. Like we talked before, well, we didn't really talk about it, we kind of just etched our way into it, but what I was saying is that there are different versions of, well, there's morphemes that some English learners get wrong, such as the ed morpheme, right? And so the ed morpheme is obviously the past tense, that we can see why they get that wrong, right? It's obviously them trying to put these verbs into things that they've learned before, and sometimes it's wrong. So there's also the thing with the progressive plural, the ing with the to be. There's also the auxiliary progressive, where he is going, I am going to, they are going to. The irregular past and the regular past with ed, as we have seen before. There is no, like, for example, a learner might completely know the verb to be, but he might have problems with the irregular past, or vice versa. A student might know the irregular past but have problems with the verb to be. There is really no like sequential stages of, oh, you have to get this one right to get this one, etc. No, they completely in different spots where I don't know the verb to be, Oh, or I know the verb to be, but I don't know the irregular past. Or student B might say, oh, I know the irregular past, but I don't know the verb to be. So it honestly depends on every single student. There's no like, okay, no, step. This is the way you have to learn it. So there's also the negation, where we in Spanish like to use no a lot. No me gusta, or no, la bici no. Like, no vayas por la bici, o no quiero la bici, o no, esa bici no, right? And so English, that transfers over to English a lot, where they say no bicycle, I don't like it, no me gusta, right? A mí no me gusta, and so they translate it to no like it, instead of saying I don't like it. So that's one of the things that second language learners tend to get wrong, and there are different stages that they can develop this. So from I don't like it to he don't like it. So when the teacher says no, you have to say I don't like it, and they say, oh, clicks, right? Like, okay, so it's don't. He don't like it. And then you have to say no, now it's he doesn't like it. And that's where the stage 3 comes in. They can say you cannot go there, he was not happy, she don't like rice, and you have to say, oh no, she doesn't like rice. Stage 4 is where they completely realize that doesn't also comes into play when we're talking about different people, not just yourself. It's I don't like, no, okay, there we go. I don't like, but he doesn't like. When you're talking about him, it's doesn't. When you're talking about yourself, it's don't. So we have to give them really that edge of like, no, these things exist. So doesn't is for third party, he doesn't, and don't is for first party, like I don't. So that's where stage 4 comes in. And so yeah, it talks about that, and it talks about these types of morphemes. So just something quick that the text goes into is called More About First Language Influence, which talks about, that says that different scientists believe that language doesn't influence too much. But it also talks about how, yes, it probably, some researchers have seen that it doesn't influence too much, but 98% of the research says that there is a link to the first language when learning the second language, and I believe that to be 100% true, because why would we say that it doesn't influence? Like, it's just absurd to me to say like, no, it doesn't influence. Like, it influenced by way too much. So one of the things that I found interesting was another way in which learners' first language can affect second language acquisition, is by making it difficult for them to notice that something they are saying is not feature of the language that is used by a more proficient speaker. So now we have a table called the SAVO table, which is a subject, verb, object, adverb. Object, adverb. So that's in English, right? We have the subject, which is Mary. Verb, ran, object, for example, often, Mary drinks tea. Mary drinks tea often, Mary often drinks tea, and Mary drinks often tea. So it's fairly easy for the English language to kind of mix and match verbs, whereas Spanish, for one example that I can think of right now on the top of my head, is the adjective with a noun. The red bus, el carro azul. No, sorry, el camión azul. El camión rojo. Right? So it takes away like, okay, so now we see in English, I have to, so you're telling me, so what a learner would say, so you're telling me that now in English, not only does it have a different grammatical structure, but now adjectives, I have to swap them around. And a lot of the times, from what I've seen, children or even adults can get scared because of this. So that's just something quick that I wanted to mention. Okay, so vocabulary. Now, I want to start out by saying a quick paragraph that I read on the pages. It says, for most people, the importance of vocabulary seems very clear. As it has often been remarked, we can communicate by using words that are not placed in proper order, pronounced perfectly, or marked with the proper grammatical morphemes. But communication often breaks down if we do not use the correct word. Although circumlocution and gesture can sometimes compensate, the importance of vocabulary can hardly be overestimated. So vocabulary is also something really important that second language learners have to obviously learn. Now, vocabulary is something that we all have to learn eventually, right? Even though we start out with simple vocabulary. There's actually a list here that says list 1, list 2, and list 3 that marks words by their difficulty. List 1 has words like friend, more, town, book, hunt, sing, box, smile, ite, and night. List 2 has more complicated words like hamburger, coke, t-shirt, Facebook, taxi, pizza, hotel, dollar, internet, and disco. List 3 has even more difficult words, which include words like government, responsibility, dictionary, elementary, remarkable, description, expression, international, duniment, I didn't even know that one, entente, which I have no idea what that means, and it probably will after this video. So, among the factors that new vocabulary more easily learnable by a second language learner is the frequency with which a word is seen, heard, and understood. So, it's interesting because I come from a place, I used to live in Colorado for a bit, and so a lot of the times there they would use really complicated languages, though I learned that in parts of California, parts in Florida, there is more of a Latino-based community, which means that a lot of the times most of these communities won't even have the chance to learn these second languages, these new words unless they, I don't know, pick up a book, right? Which, I'm not trying to discriminate, but it happens rarely. So it says that all the words in list 1 look easy because they are simply one-syllable words that refer to easily illustrated actions or objects. There are also quite common words in English appearing among the 1,000 most frequent words. So there's actually something interesting. So it says an educated adult speaker of English is believed to know at least 20,000 words. Some estimates suggest a number that is more than twice that, but most everyday conversation requires a far smaller number, something more like 2,000 words. So it says that we as English speakers know 20,000 words, but in everyday conversation we only use about 20,000 words, which is honestly less than half of the words that we know that we use in common conversation, right? So as we like it says right here, and I'm quoting, as we saw in chapter 1, children learn thousands of words in their first language with little observable effort. Obviously this is extremely true, right? Children learn words because they kind of have to, or because they just know that this is what my partner uses. Oh, I'm going to start using this word as well. Let's say his partner, he's never seen the word government. He hears his buddy say government, and he says, oh, well, what is that? Right? And so then all of a sudden he acquires this new word almost effortlessly. It's probably just in the playground, probably he's just talking to his buddy at lunch, and boom, he's learned 3 new words already. Whereas we as adults that are learning a second language, it's not as easy for us, right? We have to go online, we have to learn, constantly search these words, and it takes more energy for us to learn new words than for a child would. So the first step in knowing a word is simply to recognize it that it is a word, right? So there's words like frolip, laggy, and scroll. So laggy, I know it means that it stopped for a while. But the other ones, such as frolip and scroll, I have no idea what they mean, obviously, because I haven't seen them, or I haven't used them, or I haven't heard them. It says that, on the other hand, some students who have never studied English might already know words in list 2 because they are part of the international vocabulary, and that's very true, right? Words like chocolate, we know this because chocolate from Spanish, so obviously it just clicks. With increasing internalization of communications, many languages have borrowed and adapted words from other languages. Students throughout the world may be surprised to learn how many words I already know in a language they are trying to learn. That's extremely true. I remember when I was in elementary school, I was really surprised that most of the words that I learned are in English. On the other hand, students may have particular difficulty with words that look similar to language but have different meanings. I wouldn't really know about that because I don't know more than 2 languages. So yeah, that's a quick little thing on vocabulary. So real quick, pragmatics. So pragmatics is the study of how language is used in context to express such things as differences, politeness, and difference. Even if learners acquire a vocabulary of 5,000 and a good knowledge of syntax and phonology of the target language, they can still encounter difficulty in using the language when it comes to being polite, or hey, can I borrow that pencil, or hey, may I go to the bathroom, right? It's more like, hey, can I go to the bathroom, or give me that pencil, when they don't mean harm, but it's like, okay, well, let's talk about pragmatics, and let's say a more polite or more society acceptable way of saying things. So there's a really quick example that says, give me that book. Right, that's what a second language learner would say. Oh, give me that book. Like I said before, he means no harm, right? There's no harm in that. He's like, oh, just give me the book. But in English, it's like, okay, wait, whoa. Before I give you this book, how about some pragmatics, right? So it says, or I wonder if you mind letting me have that book when you finish with it. So yeah, it extends the sentence by a lot, right? Instead of saying, give me the book, now you're saying, oh, I wonder if you mind letting me have that book when you're finished with it. So you're not just saying, give it now. No, you're saying, you're giving it more context. Like, I wonder, like, maybe not. If you don't want to give it to me, it's okay. And when you're finished with it. So now you're giving more context and saying, instead of just saying, oh, give me that book. Another cool thing is that learning how to make and reject suggestions has also been an extensive issue. So, for example, they would reject an advisor's suggestions to make a particular course by saying, I think I am not interested in that course, right? So right there, a professor would say, oh, he's not interested, and just walk away. When instead, the second language learner said, my schedule conflicts with that course, or I think this other course would be better at meeting my needs, which was more of a typical native speaker rejection response. So instead of just saying, oh, I'm not interested in that course, which a second language learner would say, a native speaker would say, oh, I am not interested in this course because I have a job, or it conflicts with my schedule. Maybe they are interested, just not at that time. So pragmatics is huge when it comes to second language learning, though it's one of the hardest things to do. I believe so, right? Because you're trying to give context to not only what you're trying to say, but also trying to be polite. So for a long time, it was assumed that second language classrooms could not provide appropriate opportunities for students to learn many different speech acts. And yeah, while that might be true, I think that's changing a lot. Especially because I give a lot of what is, I like to role play a lot in my classrooms. So I like to fine tune these things, right? And that's where phonology comes into, like fine-tuning what the fine-tuning the language of the speaker, right? Even when it comes to phonology. So right here it says, Pavel Trofimovich has looked at learning pronunciation from a somewhat unusual perspective. His research raises questions about how well learners perceive the specific sounds of new language while at focus on meaning. Second language learners of Spanish were asked to listen to a list of familiar Spanish words for the purpose of comparison, yada yada yada, right? So it's like saying like, okay, it depends on the teacher how you're going to pronounce these words and how you're going to use phonology. I think there was a really cool example that Mrs. Cecilia gave to us. I can't think of it right now, but it honestly depends a lot on the teacher. Pronunciation is crucial to the language, obviously. The word, actually, there was one called Ivan, one of our teachers, Ivan, gives translation, amazing teacher, by the way. He says pharaoh, right? And he tells us, well, how do you pronounce this? And we say pharaoh. And some of us say faro. So right there, it's like, okay, well, where did you learn to say faro? Or did you just completely make that up and you're just following your language instincts, right? So yeah, phonology is huge when it comes to language. It's important for you to look professional, not only sound professional, right? But to kind of say like, hey, I know this language and I also know how to pronounce it. So as a student from Lengua Inglesa, it's crucial for me to learn how to pronounce things as well. Some things I obviously mess up with, and that's fine, right? I'm just learning, and I feel like messing up on words or messing up on different things that you say is a key for you to get them right. A quick summary of what everything we just saw is that the language that second language learners produce and understand changes as they have more exposure to the language and they use it in a greater variety of situations. Describing those changes has been the focus of this chapter. We have seen that there are strong patterns of similarity across the learners of different ages, learning in different contexts, and starting from different first language backgrounds. The focus of this chapter has been mainly on these similarities. In Chapter 3, we'll turn our attention to some of the ways in which learners differ from each other and how those individual differences affect how quickly and how well they succeed in second language acquisition. So, most of this chapter was about how we can see changes over time. We can. Things like don't to doesn't, pharaoh to pharaoh, banana to banana, right? Like, these changes occur, and it's like, it's on the teacher to say, it's my job to have these kids pronounce correctly, or have these adults even to pronounce correctly, to give them the right grammar, to say, no, it's not don't, for he it's doesn't, it's for I it's don't. It's crucial, and I feel like not only it takes time, but it also takes the correct education. So this was a quick summary of what that chapter was about. I really enjoyed this chapter. I believe it, for me, I've experienced these things completely. Like, I know exactly what this chapter is talking about, and I know that it happens all the time. It's gonna continue to happen until we somehow get teachers that give more care to give more care to their English classes and how they teach them as well. But yeah, my name is Miguel Mancinas, and this has been a report on the chapter. Thank you.